Technology Seminar for Korean Companies. My name is Regina Chang. On behalf of the Consulate General of the Republic of Korea and the Association of Supplier Companies of Hyundai and Kia, I would like to thank each of you for joining us today. Today's seminar will help develop skills for relationship building with local communities, the press, and employees. Also, this event will provide the opportunity to hear and share positive experiences and success stories. Before we begin our agenda, I would like to recognize our VIP participants. Ajin USA President Kipecher. He's the Vice Chairman of Hyundai Kia Suppliers Association. And from Ballers Bar, Attorney at Law, Lengo John and Zephyr Stephen. And Dan Solution Alabama, President Chang Young-gi. He's also the Chairman of Hyundai Kia Suppliers Association. And from Georgia Chamber of Commerce, President Chris Clark. Georgia Department of Economic Development Project Manager Jane Caraway, and from Hyundai Motor Manufacturing Executive Vice President Chong Hoin, and from Korean Air Regional Manager of ANA Chen Park is also the Chairman of Korean Trade Consultative Council of ANA. And from Lagrange Troop County Chamber of Commerce, President Paige Estes. And from Mondo America, President Taeyong Kwok. And from SKC, President Ho Jin Kim. And from Korean Consul General Yvonne Kim. And also our interpreter, Yeon Byung Chang. As we begin today's agenda, we'll start our opening remarks with Mr. Young Hee Chan. Mr. Young Hee Chan is the president of Hand Solution Alabama. He also serves as chairman of Hyundai Kia Suppliers Association. Please welcome Mr. Chan.
안녕하십니까. 연말에 여러 일정으로 바쁘실 텐데 오늘 PR 세미나에 참석해 주신 협력사 법인장님과 인재인 여러분들, 애틀랜타 지상고속의 회원사 대표님들께 감사드립니다. 특별히 오늘 귀중한 세미나 자리를 만들어주신 김일범 총영사님께 깊은 감사의 말씀을 드리겠습니다. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to attend today's seminar for the Korean Kia Suppliers of HMM and KMG. Today's seminar is designed to learn and share the skills how to effectively improve the public relationships with the local community, the press, and employees. I hereby deeply appreciate to the Consulate General of Republic of Korea in Atlanta, Yvonne Kim, for the kind arrangement of today's seminar, and also thanks for the lecturers, Mr. Clark, Chris Clark, President of Georgia Chamber of Commerce, Mr. John Ranger, and Stephen Surfers, from Attorney at Law, Village Star, and also appreciate to Mr. Ho Jin Kim, President of SKC, and Mr. Taeyong Kwok, President of Mondo America. 현대 기아차가 미국 앨라버마 주에 진출한 지난 10년 동안에 40여 이상 협력사가 전반 진출해 있습니다. 그동안 2만 명 이상의 신규 고용 창출이 있었고, 여기에 2, 3차 협력사를 포함할 경우에 고용수는 상당할 것으로 생각합니다. 유감스럽게도 그에 따른 저희들의 경제적, 사회적 공헌에 대해서 지역사회로부터 충분한 이해와 감사의 표시를 받지 못하고 있는 부분이 있지 않나 생각됩니다. 대부분의 진출 기업들이 현지 직원들과 지역사회의 관계 증대를 위해서 열심히 노력하고 있고 또 좋은 관계를 유지하고 있습니다만 아직 문화 차이는 여러 문제로 인해서 긴장과 갈등이 있어왔고 그에 따라서 협력사와 때로는 주재원을 상대로 해서 소송도 제기되고 있고 또한 지역 언론인들로부터 사실과 다르거나 왜곡된 편파된 기사가 나오고 있는 입장입니다. 우리 협력사들이 진정한 현지 기업으로 정착하고 존경받고 인정받는 로컬 기업으로 성장하기 위해서는 보다 건전한 지역 현지 직원들과 지역사회와의 공공관계를 확립하는 것이 필요한 시점이 아닌가 생각합니다. 현지 직원들의 회사에 대한 충성도 그리고 지역사회의 긴밀한 도움과 이해가 없이는 우리 협력사들과 한국 기업들이 이곳의 로컬 기업으로서의 지속적인 성장이 어렵다고 생각합니다. 오늘 세미나를 통해서 이곳에 진출해 있는 한국 기업들이 어떻게 하면 현지 직원들과 또 현지 지역사회와 좋은 관계를 형성할 수 있을지에 대해서 그리고 지역사회에 안정적인 로컬 기업으로 정착할 수 있을지에 대해서 전문가님들의 조언을 들어보고 아울러 진출기업의 성공사를 통해서 우리 협력사들이 이전보다 더욱 건강한 공공관계를 형성하고 발전해 나가기를 희망합니다. 다시 한번 오늘 세미나 자리를 만들어 주시고 직접 참여해 주신 김희범 총영사님께 깊은 감사를 드리고 준비하시고 애써주신 이민용 장님께 감사를 드립니다. 감사합니다.
이번 행사가 굉장히 유용한 행사가 되었습니다. 생각했습니다. I just said thanks to all for being here. We have representatives of some major Korean companies, the engineers in the Southeast region, and we have wonderful speakers. We have respected guests also here. So I just want to thank them all. In particular, I want to recognize Mr. Chris Clark, the President of Georgia Chamber of Commerce. I just want to thank him for being here to share his thoughts and insights with us. And also I want to thank the our special representative. I just want to thank both of them. I just want to say a couple of things here. First is that it is unprecedented. It is unprecedented for Korean companies get around to have a discussion, a whole conference with made a focus on health relations or relations per se. It might be a small step, but I think it's very, very, very meaningful step. When we planned for this event, I wanted to do something like kind of casual, informal, and also we need to celebrate the year end. When we celebrate the end, we celebrate by drinking and singing. We mix whiskey and beer in a glass and drinking at once and play a karaoke. But this time, we decided to make a huge deviation from the routine and then the sitting in the conference room. So I have to say that all of us deserve a lot, so I just want to thank them all for making this possible. And second, this conference is about building relations. Building relations. In all seriousness, you want to put relationship building at the forefront of our business practice. When a company does a business, it has a relationship with local community, local industries, local officials, local chambers of commerce, local law enforcement officers, local media, and so on and so on. So we need to foster and grow and strengthen the web of relations to be successful. So our continued growth and success will depend on our ability to develop the relationship. So this is precisely what we will achieve out of this conference. So I look forward to having meaningful and productive discussion with you, and I hope that we can continue to strengthen our bilateral relations with the Republic of Korea and the great service states. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by thanking the Consul General for the invitation today. It is a pleasure to be able to work. The Consul General represents the country of Korea as well as all of your businesses extremely well. So, Consul General, thank you again for all your work. I also want to recognize my partner, Paige Estes. Thank you, Paige, for being here today, and the great work that you do on the local level. And also my good friend DJ Packer. It's always a pleasure to be with you, and thank you for your support of economic development and business in the state of Georgia as well. And the Consul General asked me to come and share thoughts with you today. I was very encouraged to do so and very excited because of my previous job this week was very important to me. Before I became the president of the Georgia Chamber, I was a deputy commissioner at the Georgia Department of Economic Development. And 8 years ago this week, at the Atlanta airport, I met for the first time Mr. Young An Mo, as we call him now, on his first visit to look for a site for Kia's manufacturing plant. I had talked to him the previous week on the phone, and our conversation has stuck with me for the last 8 years. It was about 7 o'clock U.S. time, about 7 a.m. Korea time, and he said that he was very interested in finding a location for Kia in the state of Georgia, and would we be interested in working with him? And I laughed and I told him, of course we would. We would welcome Kia and all of the suppliers. And we continued the conversation and we talked about different communities and locations in Georgia. We talked about incentives and all the things that you're very familiar with. But at the end of the conversation, he said, Chris, before I come to Georgia, I want to know that the community of Troup County would like a partner in Kia and would like us in their community. And I answered him immediately. I said, Mr. Hunt, anyone, any community in Georgia would like you and would like your facility. And he said, no, specifically, it's very important for Kia that we have the right public relations and the right partnerships with our local community. He said, so I'd like you to go visit the community and call me tomorrow and tell me their answer. So I went down to Paige's office, to her predecessor, the next morning, very early, and talked to community leaders from all over Troup County, and all of them together said, we welcome Kia, we welcome their suppliers, we want to work with them. And I called Mr. On back that night and shared that with him. And he flew in this week, 8 years ago, and we spent the first day in a helicopter flying all over this area, and all over Alabama and touring Monday. And that night on the way back, he said, Chris, it is very important for us that we have the right relationship in the community where we locate, as well as in the state, because public relations matters to our company. And for the next 11 weeks, we negotiated out that contract in California, in Atlanta, and in West Point, Georgia, until I flew with the governor to Korea, and we signed the contract. And I want to commend Kia because they've kept their word, Paige. They've been a great corporate citizen. They've been very engaged at the local level. They've been very engaged at the state level. And they have the image, I believe, that they want that they'll use to continue to grow. I work with companies every day from all over the world, companies from all over the state of Georgia, that understand the importance of good public relationships because they know that they need the public support, they need the support of other businesses, and they need the support of government officials. And so many of those companies, or most of those companies, are members of their local chamber, and they're members of their state chambers. And I think that's a good model for our supplier network in both Alabama and in Georgia to engage in a much different way than you've done so far. So let me share with you a few thoughts about what chambers of commerce are, what their impact is, and why you should be involved, and why it's a good model for you for improving your public relations. Before I do that, I'd like to give you a little test. Raise your hand if you are a member, or your company is a member of your local chamber of commerce. Thank you very much. Raise your hand if you or your company is a member of the state's chamber of commerce. Thank you very much. And raise your hand if you and your company are members of the United States Chamber of Commerce. Ah, okay. We found one. Let me see a show of hands if you or a member of your executive committee are involved in any civic clubs, so Rotary Club, Optimus, a few of you are. So all of these, and we can go on, but all of these are different models and different vehicles for you to get involved in your community and improve public relations. But let me focus for a minute on the three different kinds of chambers of commerce. Your local chamber, which I've worked out in the past, the state chamber, which I run now in Georgia, and the U.S. chamber. So those of you that are engaged at the local level in your local chambers with Page or your other communities, you're focused on how you can make that community better. You're working on local issues. You're developing relationships with county commissioners, mayors, city council members. But what you're doing while you're doing all of that is you're creating in that community a very positive public image and a positive public relations, not just for your employees and your product, but your ability to recruit new employees and suppliers and partners into that community. You're also developing relationships with other business leaders at the local level, which is absolutely critical. And maybe most importantly, those local elected officials know that you care about the community where you live and where you work, because you take the time to go to meetings and events and different functions when you probably rather be working or be at home with your family. There's also the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and I know this can get very confusing because we're all separate entities, but we all work together. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce, as you can imagine, is very focused on Congress and the U.S. Senate and the White House and relationships and things that improve business in the whole country. Now, I serve on a committee for the United States Chamber of Commerce in charge of their political affairs, and we work to make sure that we elect members of Congress and Senate that support business and support economic growth and the things that we care about. Now, what about the state chambers? Well, what do they do? What is their function? Well, we work on a variety of issues that improve the business climate of the state of Georgia. But we also give businesses an opportunity to put their brand out, to develop relationships with elected leaders like Representative Pack, with the governor, with the lieutenant governor, and others. And we work to facilitate business via the use and the purchase of products that are made in Georgia by Georgians and by Georgia government. Those are all very, very important things. Now, in Alabama, you don't have a state chamber of commerce. Instead, you have the Alabama Business Council. They function essentially the same way that our organization does, and they're good friends. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my organization and the types of things that we work on, as an example for both Alabama and Georgia. Now, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce has 25,000 businesses that are members. We have 500 manufacturers, including Kia, who sits on our board and our board of governors. We represent companies from 500 different SIC codes in 159 counties and 400 local chambers and other business associations who all work together to help businesses grow, help businesses have a positive image in our community, and also hopefully sell more of their products that they make here in the state of Georgia. Now, what kind of issues do we care about? Well, the hallmark of my organization, while Paige's organization is making sure that you have a good relationship with the county commission and the school board and the mayor, ours is working with our legislators, the governor, the lieutenant governor, and our congressional delegation. So there are many issues that you care about and you work on every day that we, as lobbyists and advocates on your behalf, are working on. Let me share with you just a few that I think matter to all of you in the room. Transportation. It has been a priority of my organization for 15 years to deepen the Port of Savannah and grow the Port of Brunswick so that we can continue to grow the economy of the state of Georgia. I'm happy to say that in a few weeks, the Georgia Governor, Nathan Gill, the Georgia General Assembly will pass the final funding for the port deepening on the state side, and we'll continue to work with our federal government on the port funding to make that happen in Savannah. We work very closely on workforce development. All of you here have training programs. You're all looking for the best employees. The Georgia Chamber has supported Quick Start. We were actually part of the group that began Quick Start almost 30 years ago now. We're working now to make sure that high school seniors are ready for work when they graduate. And I know many of you are working on programs in your own communities. We also work and spend a great deal of time on taxes. Does anyone here enjoy paying taxes? No. It took the Georgia Chamber several years, but this 2 sessions ago we were finally able, with the support of Representative Pack and members of both parties in Georgia, to pass a sales tax exemption on the energy used in manufacturing. I don't know if any of you are in the financial offices in your company, but you all are seeing a decrease in eventual elimination of that energy tax. That didn't happen because one company said we need to do that. It didn't happen because one person said we needed to do it. It happened because businesses all over Georgia came together, working through their local and state chambers with our legislators to make the case to change that law. And now your bottom line is better for it. Of course, we work on issues like health care, which are very exciting. I won't bore you with today. But we also work on many international issues. The Georgia Chamber has fought hard on immigration reform and efforts in the state of Georgia, and we continue to lobby in Washington on reforming our guest worker program so that we can get the best and brightest from around the world to come here and stay here and work for our country. And we were very pleased to work with the Consul General, and was it last session or last session, on passing a driver's license reciprocal agreements on driver's license. That's a difficult word to say. I'll try that. That was an issue that first arose for me when we were working with Mr. Ahn negotiating the deal with Kia. But it took us that long to get the information together, to build the coalition, to have the right PR in place, so that we could go to the General Assembly and we could pass that bill. Another area that's vitally important for us, and I believe is vitally important for you, is keeping Georgia, and I know the Alabama Business Council believes this and works hard on this here, making sure that we keep our right to work laws in place and the strongest in the country so that we can fight any attempts by unions to come into this state, in Alabama, or in Georgia. If you read the Georgia newspapers, you've seen my name in there frequently recently, going head-to-head with the head of the UAW, who obviously, you know, is working hard in Tennessee and Mississippi to unionize facilities there. And I've said very clearly to them and any other group that we're drawing a line in the sand and we will fight any efforts for them to come into these southern states, particularly into Georgia and Alabama. Now, to be effective in doing that, to be successful, we have to have a business community that works together, that has the right PR around it, so that we don't give unions the reason to come into our state. We don't have workforce issues. We have workers that are happy, that want their jobs, that come to work and are excited about working there. Because when they feel that way, they're not going to be out there trying to unionize, and we're going to be able to fight off those national organizations as they try to come into the state of Georgia. So when you think about your chambers, whether it's a local chamber of commerce or a state chamber of commerce, we are engaged on your behalf, both to make sure you've got the right public image, but also to make sure that we've got the right laws and bills in place so that you can continue to grow and have a positive experience here in the state of Georgia. Now, you can only do that, as the Consul General said, if you've got the right relationships. Now, Chambers of commerce and civic clubs and engagement is different in every country around the world. In Europe, in many countries, it's mandatory that companies are involved in their chambers of commerce so that they are always working on that positive public relations aspect. And they're always working to make sure there are business-friendly policies in place. I wish the government would make membership mandatory in our chambers in the United States, but that's not the way that it works here. Instead, our focus is voluntary. We're not an arm of the government. We don't get money from the federal government or the state government or the local government. We get money from businesses who want to partner with each other, build their relationships, and influence people that have an impact on their business. Now, as you go back to your own company, you've got to put together the right strategy. Let me suggest to you a couple of ideas about what that strategy might look like. Now, it's one thing, it's very easy for your company to write a check and give it to someone and say, we're doing something good for the community. I appreciate that, I applaud that, but that's not the end result of a positive relationship and public relations that you want. In order to do what you really want, at the end of the day, you've got to engage, which means you've got to have people identified in your company that are going to be part of the local civic club, part of their local chamber, part of the state chamber, part of the different associations that exist. The companies that we work with have strategies around this. They know where the CEO is going to be, where the plant manager is going to serve, where the CFO is going to serve. They have that mapped out and they go and they engage in those areas. And so my suggestion to you is to join that local chamber, yes, like many of you have done, but to make sure that you're engaged, you're at the events, you're at the education events, the monthly meetings, and you're using those relationships in that body to tell your story and tell good things that are going on. Because it's not just the members of that organization that are here. It's all the different people in the community. Because we also serve as a little bit of a news network to share the good news and the good stories about what you're doing and what your industry is doing. And I would also encourage you, it's very important at the local level, but many of you, most of you are regulated industries. You have issues with the federal government and state government, and it's important for you to have your brand and have relationships at the state level, at the state capital, as well as in Washington. And that's why I think joining your state chamber is a good model for that. There are also other associations out there, manufacturers association, automotive associations, your supplier association, and all those should be part of your portfolio and how you engage as well. And so good PR for businesses in Georgia and Alabama, they aren't just about you buying an ad or reading a story in a magazine. The business leaders and the elected leaders in this state, and in my state, and in your community, they need to know you personally. They need to have a relationship with you, that they see you outside of work. All of those things are extremely, extremely important in our culture, particularly in the culture in the South. And so I think if you will engage that way, if you'll be strategic about your engagements, you'll see your brand grow. You'll see your support increase. You'll find that when we need something and we need support of elected leaders, like Representative Pack, it'll be much easier for them. It won't take us 10 years. We'll be able to act much more quickly. When you need incentives, when you're growing your company, when you need a certain type of permit that you might need maybe for water, for air permits, all those things that you need to make your business work are relying upon the relationships that you have. And I hope that this conference that you have here over the next couple of days, I hope you get good information. It's one thing to listen to us, get up and talk to you. It's a much different thing to go back in your company, to take the time to put together the plan, and to do as the Consul General said, and work hard to improve and maintain positive public relations. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you today and to be with some of my good friends. And Consul General, I'm happy to answer any questions if there are. Well, if there are no questions, thank you for the opportunity and look forward to talking to you later this afternoon. Thank you.
Good afternoon. afternoon, everyone. We're here from Ballard's Bar. My name is Stephanie Kim, and I'm an attorney with the Public Finance Department and the Korea Initiative at Ballard's Bar. Thank you so much for having us. 안녕하세요, 여러분. 저는 발라드스 바에서 공공금융과 한국기업 관련 법률을 맡고 있는 김세은 변호사라고 합니다. 반갑습니다. 이제 프레젠테이션 해주실 파트너 변호사 두 분을 잠시 소개하도록 하겠습니다. To briefly add on to the introductions of the partners, I would just like to add that Mr. John Langle is the head chairman of the litigation department at Ballard's Bar. We are a national law firm with 14 offices across the U.S., and he oversees all litigation matters for the firm. His area of practice is in labor and employment, and he has led the labor and employment group at the firm for over 30 years. And also, next to Mr. Langle is Mr. Stephen Suffless. And Mr. Suffless as well is a managing partner of the New Jersey office for the firm, and he practices in labor and employment as well. And they've been named the best lawyers in America in labor and employment, and they're here to share with you more about U.S. labor and employment law, particularly with the focus of helping Korean companies operating in the U.S. avoid lawsuits by their employees and union issues. So we hope that the session is helpful for you, and I'm going to hand the mic over to our first speaker, Mr. Stephen Suffless.
Thank you, sir. First, it's a real pleasure and honor to be here and be able to address you. Let me begin with this point. I'm going to speak about union issues, but before I even get to that, for both my partner John and I think if there is one issue, one takeaway for this audience to have, for people who are from offshore coming into the United States, and I say this to all my clients, no matter where they're from, but transnational companies in particular have trouble with this one issue. And the issue is this: if an intelligent business person comes up with a solution to a problem that involves employees, and the solution is a reasonable one, it's logical, it's rational, I can tell you, unfortunately, that very often it violates U.S. employment law. This is an area where your natural instinct can get you into trouble, even though that's not your intent. So if that's the one thing that you take away, the one thing to take away is that before you make decisions in your business dealing with employment law issues, labor union issues, you really need to make sure that you're working closely with your human resources people, you're working closely with outside legal counsel who have expertise in this area, because the law is complicated, it's complex, and it's not always clear. So that's the one thing that I would tell you in terms of an overarching principle. Next slide, Stephanie. The purpose of today's program is to talk about building positive relationships between your businesses and your workers and your communities. But I'm here to tell you that there's one group of people out there who are not looking to build a positive relationship with you. And it's the United Auto Workers. Bob King is the international president of this important and politically powerful labor union. And he said, if we don't organize these transnationals, I don't think there's a long-term future for the United Auto Workers. I really don't. Next slide. Now, what does that mean? Think about the United Auto Workers. Think about a labor union as a business, because that's what they are. They generate income. The revenue is the dues of their members. They have expenses for staff. They have expenses for political lobbying. They are a business. And in 1979, the business of the United Auto Workers had 1.5 million members. Think about that as a customer base. In 2002, the United Auto Workers had 383,000 members. So think about that. If your business loses 75% of your customers, you're in trouble. And what is it that you're going to do? Well, the union, the UAW, has strategically said that they are going to try to organize new workers. They have to. They have to expand their customer base. And they're going to do it in the business sectors where the union already has a major presence. Their position is, let's go to the businesses that we're familiar with. It includes higher education. You can believe the United Auto Workers represents lots of university professors and employees. It includes gaming. Believe it or not, the United Auto Workers represents a lot of casino workers around the country. But most importantly, it represents auto. This is the United Auto Workers. And they have said in the South, where there are more than 100,000 workers, not just for the manufacturers, but for, like you, the suppliers and the vendors. That's where they are targeting their strategic initiatives for new members and new business. Next slide. Now, what are the tactics that the union is using to try to broaden their membership base? Well, they're doing two things. The first, and this is the one that unions have used for 75 years, it's called bottom-up organizing. It's traditional grassroots organizing. And what happens is the UAW goes out, they contact the employees, the workers, they meet with them individually, and they try to recruit them. They try to convince them to support the union, and then they build groups, invite your friends, invite more friends, invite more friends, and the idea is to build it from the bottom up. Now, more recently, and we'll talk about this in a minute, but more recently, the union has been seeking the assistance of community leaders and local civic groups to help them organize the workers. And the goal is to have an election before the National Labor Relations Board, where employees walk into a voting booth, just like they do in a government election, and they cast a ballot either in favor of the union or against the union. So that's the typical historic tactic. Next slide. But what we're seeing the UAW do more and more in the South is what we call top-down organizing. And what happens here is the UAW does not reach out for the employees directly. They do not reach out for the workers. They pressure senior management. They contact the board of directors. And what they do is they attack the business on a local, national, or global basis. They try to shame the business about their practices with respect to their employees. And we'll talk about this in a minute as well, some more. But the goal is to have the business leaders, senior management, without regard to what the employees want, sign what we call a card check neutrality agreement. And what that means is the employer agrees to say nothing to oppose union organizing efforts. The employer agrees to give the union access to employees, to come onto the plant site to meet with employees while they're on the clock, where the employer gives the union the names and home addresses, phone numbers, email addresses for your workers, and where the employer agrees not to have a secret ballot union election, where instead the union is recognized based upon the number of employees who have either signed a petition or signed cards expressing support for the union. Taking the employee's voice, taking the employee's personal opinions out of the equation. Doesn't matter. Next slide. So let's talk about a couple of case studies. What has the UAW specifically been doing? And many of this has been in the paper. I'm sure you're familiar with much of it. Number one, we've got Volkswagen in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Here, this is top-down organizing. The UAW in America has partnered with the Volkswagen Global Works Council in Germany. In Germany, the labor union has a seat on the Volkswagen board of directors, and they have a lot of influence over senior corporate management in Germany. And what the UAW has been doing is working hand in hand with the German union. They are putting pressure on VW's board of directors and very senior management. What we've seen is frequent visits from the leaders of the German union to Chattanooga to meet with workers, to meet with local UAW representatives, and again to try to coalesce this pressure on senior management to recognize the union without an election. And the UAW is pressuring Volkswagen very heavily to take a hands-off approach to unionization. Now, I was just talking to Chris Clark during lunch, and he confirmed what I know, and that is that at the local level, local management at VW in Chattanooga wants nothing to do with the UAW, but the open question is, what happens with this international pressure in Germany, and how does that affect what happens in Tennessee? Next. You also, I'm sure, are aware of Nissan's situation in Canton, Mississippi. There, the UAW has done something very unique. Well, I shouldn't say very unique, but unique in the level of intensity. Remember, we've talked about how do Korean companies build positive relationships with local communities. Well, what the UAW has done to Nissan in Mississippi is to go to local organizations like the NAACP and the General Missionary Baptist State Convention of Mississippi, and they have had these civic organizations demonstrate and pressure Nissan, complaining about Nissan's labor relations. They went so far as to support a report that was written by a professor at Cornell University, which criticizes Nissan's approach to labor relations. The professor, it's his opinion that what Nissan is doing violates international rules of law. It's completely lawful under the United States legal principles, but again, it's the shaming principle, trying to shame Nissan by claiming that they are violating international human rights, basic civil rights in Mississippi, and international legal principles. The UAW is having pickets in Brazil at Nissan dealerships because Nissan is a co-sponsor of the 2016 Olympics. Actor Danny Glover, a famous U.S. actor, has been visiting college campuses to recruit college students to come out and participate in protests against Nissan. Next slide. Closer to home, at Hyundai in Montgomery, and I know there's a representative here from Hyundai, the UAW tried and has been unsuccessful, just as they were at Nissan. In 2001, there was a union election in Canton, Mississippi, and the union lost. So that's why they're trying different strategies. But with respect to Hyundai, when their bottom-up grassroots organizing failed, they've organized protests at Hyundai dealerships, supposedly about mistreatment of workers in Korea. What does that have to do with the U.S.? But that's what they're doing. They've demonstrated at a Hyundai distribution center near Detroit to support Korean union workers. Again, the theory is, let us shame the company, and if we can put so much bad public relations, then maybe we can force the company to deal with us. And finally, next slide, Mercedes-Benz in Vance, Alabama. Once again, the bottom-up organizing has been unsuccessful for Mercedes-Benz workers, but the UAW here has targeted suppliers. And this has been a successful strategy in Vance, Alabama. The UAW has won elections for ZF Industries, Faurecia Interior Systems, Johnson Controls, and Inteva, all local businesses in Alabama. And the UAW is hoping that once workers at Mercedes-Benz and the manufacturer see that the supplier workers have become unionized, that the union will be able to get some traction, generate some momentum, and build towards successful unionization. Next slide. So what should an employer in the South do? There are a couple of things that are very important. Number one, and again, this goes back to the very first point that I made. It is very important that senior management, especially senior management from overseas, is educated about U.S. labor laws and union strategy and tactics. Because the law of labor relations, the law of management dealing with unions in America, is very much different than what you are used to in your home countries. And it is very important that you are educated because, again, an intelligent business decision could run afoul of the law in the U.S. Number two, it's not enough that senior management is educated. It's important that then all managers are educated. Because, for example, you would think that there's nothing wrong with going to an employee and saying, I hear that there's the UAWs coming around. Are they having any meetings? What do you think about these issues? You would think that that's just normal question and answer with another human being. All of those questions are unlawful under the federal labor laws. So that's why it's important that everyone be trained so that there aren't inadvertent violations of the law. Next, we recommend frequently to our clients that they conduct what we call a labor relations union vulnerability audit. Look at what you're doing. Look at your practices. Look at your policies. Look at the benefits that you are paying and decide whether there are things that need to be addressed, as Mr. Clark said, to keep your workers engaged and happy. Next, review your employee handbook and your personnel policies to ensure legal compliance. The legal rules in this area of your employment policies are changing every day. Over the past 12 to 18 months, there have been significant changes to the law in this area. And so your HR office really needs to go back and look over your policies and make sure that you don't have a vulnerability in this area where perhaps you've got legal violations that need to be corrected. And finally, and probably of equal importance to any of this, once you've done steps 1, 2, 3, and 4, number 5 is engage and educate your rank and file workforce. Make sure they understand the benefits that they already have. You'd be amazed at how people, it's human nature. After a period of time, you take what you have for granted. Those valuable health benefits that you provide, a 401k plan, vacation benefits, all the benefits that you provide, people take them for granted. They forget how important they are. So it's very important that you go back and then educate your workforce about what they already have, so that way they're better armed to understand that perhaps there's nothing that a union can do to make things better for them. Next slide. Mr. King, the UAW president, has said the perception is wrong that you cannot organize in the South. And he has staked his reputation on this. He is going to be retiring within the next 12 months. And there are a number of newspaper reports that have indicated that he wants to have elections before he retires. So you may see even more activity over the next 6 to 12 months in this area. And so I think it is important for management to plan ahead. It is important for management, especially in the Korean supplier network, to think strategically about these issues now. Don't wait until the wolf is already at your door before you're thinking about this, so that you're prepared for what's coming. Thank you very much for your attention. John.
Right out front on his view of whether you're better or worse having unions. We all heard him say it. And then he said something as important. He said, I'll do my job with the chamber and work with the legislature to make sure that unions aren't welcome. But you got to do your job. And that's Steve's number 5. You need to educate the rank and file workforce about the benefits they already enjoy without a union. They need to like you, so that there's not a good argument against the legislatures and the chambers to create an easier atmosphere with unions. And there's no better person in the country to tell you that story than Steve Suffolk. I'm proud to be his partner. I thank BJ Pack and Connie Choi and Stephanie for creating this opportunity for us to be in front of you, and thank the Council General for giving us this time. I'm going to talk to you about the other part of the U.S. employment laws that also don't always seem to make sense. And my major theme is going to be that favoritism. And by favoritism, I mean liking one person over another person isn't even permissible if it results in exclusion of what we call a protected class. So if we have an all-male workforce and people happen to socialize with, do golf with, play sports with men, and wind up hiring men over women, even though they're never thinking about exclusion of women, if it results in the exclusion of women, it's wrong, we can't do it. So that's my major theme. Could we go to slide 2? So slide 2 sets the status of laws in the United States. And they're on the federal level, the state level, and the local. You cannot discriminate against employees or applicants for employment on the basis of a protected characteristic. What does discriminate mean? It simply means you can't treat them differently. Let's go to 3. Well, look at that first bullet. It tells you that almost everyone is protected by the anti-discrimination laws. So, men were never thought to be protected by the anti-discrimination laws, but today we have the concept of reverse discrimination. White men were never thought to be protected by the discrimination laws, but today we have the concept of reverse discrimination. So what do the laws mention? They mention race, they mention color, religion, sex, or gender. So man or woman, national origin, citizenship, pregnancy, age, handicap or disability, veteran status. Again, what does it mean to discriminate? Most simply, it means that you can't determine that one person is better than another based on any of these characteristics. Let's move to 4, 5, 6, all the way to number 8. So what issues do you face? Right? I told you you can't discriminate, you can't differentiate based on a series of characteristics. In the South, particularly in Alabama and Georgia, Korean employers have been sued by employees who are U.S. citizens claiming that Korean nationals or Korean American employees are given favorable treatment. The facts in a number of these cases have been in favor of the person sued. In almost all of the cases, the Korean companies have won only because of the Treaty of Friendship, Commerce, and Navigation between the United States and the Republic of Korea. And that permits preferences for executive personnel, attorneys, accountants, and other technical experts and specialists. So the cases have been decided on whether the person who was given the preferential treatment falls into the position of an executive personnel, etc. All right? And that is actually common sense legislation. Who's going to run your business? The people who are going to run your business are the people who understand it the best and understand it the best from where the business came, meaning Korea. But remember, this exception to the anti-discrimination laws applies to only employees in these categories or positions. So if you happen to be, more friendly to your neighbor who's Korean, more trusting of your neighbor who's Korean, you can't necessarily hire your neighbor or your friend, even though you may trust them more, simply because if you hire on that basis, you'll wind up excluding non-Koreans. The treaty will not stop legal claims that U.S. citizens, this is number 9. The treaty will not stop legal claims that U.S. citizens are discriminated against by being treated in a demeaning or insulting manner, held to a higher standard, or example, if a Korean customer refuses to speak with a female employee, or a Korean customer refuses to speak with someone who doesn't speak Korean. We're going to turn to 10 and 11 to give you certain guidelines. 10 is prohibited questions for both applicants and employees, and 11 goes through some examples. And on the drive over here, we were talking about things you could say or do 30 years ago that you can't say or do today, even though they're totally well-intentioned. And I gave a situation. I have 2 children. One is 36. He has 2 children. One is 32. He has 2 children. I have women associates, colleagues who I worked for or with for 15, 18 years. They're 32, they're 33, they're 34, they're 35. And when I'm talking about my grandkids, I might very well want to say, what are your plans for having a child and building a family? What's going on in your brain? I can't say that today, even though it's social, it's friendly, I'm interested, we're friends, because that might be discriminating on the basis of their plans on whether or not to have children, even though I never met them. So let's go through certain subjects here. You see impermissible, you see permissible. So sex, race, national origin. Impermissible. Can't make comments or notes about sex, race, or national origin. Just can't do it. Permissible. You can notice appearance. You're of course going to see someone who looks like he or she is over 40, is a woman or is a man, and is of a particular race or national origin. Subject, disability. Asking about a disability, the nature of a disability, or the severity of a disability is impermissible. But you can ask somebody about whether they have the ability to perform a job. So let's assume someone comes to interview who's in a wheelchair, right? You see it on site. You can't ask about the nature of the disability, but you can talk about these are the job responsibilities. You're going to be a machinist. You have to be in a machine. Can you do the work? And could we accommodate you by lowering the level of the machine, etc.? You can ask about the ability to perform a specific job function with or without a reasonable accommodation. That would be lowering the height of the machine or raising the floor for the height of the wheelchair. And if accommodation would be required, inquire about the nature of the accommodation. So I talked about raising the floor or lowering the machine. If it's an unreasonable, expensive accommodation, you might not have to make it. Subject, sexual harassment, making suggestive remarks, propositions, or gestures impermissible. What used to be water cooler, jokes around the water cooler, X-rated, off-color, permissible 30 years ago, not permissible since the mid-1980s. What is permissible in that area? Nothing. Nothing. Marital status. Are you married? Are you single? Are you divorced? Engaged? General. Anything in that area is impermissible except your benefits person might make an inquiry after the person's hired about your status or your kids, or whether you have kids for insurance purposes. Are we going to have spousal coverage? Are we going to have partner coverage? Do we have coverage for your kids? Height and weight. What is your height? What is your weight? No. Now, it says if essential to safe performance of job, there are few things today that would give you permission to do that. Children, you have them. How old? You care for them. You plan to have more children. My casual conversation with a colleague, that because I'm genuinely interested, I can't do any longer, unless it was again for the benefits purposes. Age. How old are you? When was your birthday? When did you graduate from high school? Can't do it generally, almost exclusively, maybe for benefits, but not even in that area today. Economic status, credit worthiness, you own your own home. You're ready. No. It's something that you might really be interested in unrelated to work. Where do you live? I live on such and such street. You own a house. All right? Innocent. Or are you renting? Or do you have an option to purchase? All right? Do you live in an apartment, a house? Have you ever? Well, forget about the last one. Just stop on those. You can't. You just can't go there. You've seen a lot of newspaper articles about asking whether someone's been on unemployment compensation. Have they been laid off in the recession of 2008? Can't go there. You can say, do you have a phone? Because if you have no phone, can we reach you? But your economic status, again, not so good. Can't go there. So let's go to page 14. And a lot of this goes back to what Chris Clark told you and Steve Sullivan told you. Maintain good employee relations. So how do you do that? You do performance evaluations regularly. So your employees know what's coming. They know if they need to make improvements. They may be terrific in 80% of their job and 20% of their job not so terrific. But if you evaluate them and tell them they can improve the 20%, establish and consistently follow sound employment policies. Consistency, not foolish consistency, but consistency to well-established practices is a great lesson for companies and HR specialists to know. So again, everybody knows what's coming. Address performance problems when they occur. Don't delay, don't stay in the evaluation. You did this 6 months ago when it could have been improved during those 6 months. Catch it right when it's happening. Document all problems and your expectations for resolving them. By document, I mean document appropriately. I don't mean paper trails. Don't create a document paper trail for one employee who you want to get rid of and not have done it for all the other employees, because that's going to be the very best evidence that you were seeking to get rid of that employee. And be fair, be consistent, be appropriate, have good judgment, and be fair. And for the most part, you won't run afoul of our discrimination laws. Again, thank you. Questions? We have time for questions?
Another question. So does the law, is the law set up so that the employer cannot ask, or does the law give the employee the right not to ask?
Good question. Yeah, sure. And let's get two parts to it. The question was, is the U.S. law set up so that the employer cannot ask the question, or is it set up so that the employee can refuse to answer? In the union setting, the employer cannot ask. Now, the employer can always listen. If an employee wants to come to you and speak to you about workplace issues and speak to you about union issues, you can always listen. But the employer can't start the conversation. The employer can't ask the first question. The employer cannot solicit the response. John, in discrimination areas?
Yes, just one more thing on the labor. There are ways to legally solicit a question. So let's assume you know unionization is going on. And you don't necessarily know what the questions are, but you hear about it. You can say to your employees, look, we know something is going on. If you have any issues, we have an open door, come see us. And invite them to ask the question. What this impermissible and permissible category on page 11 and 12 and 13, you can't ask the question. You can't say that you have a disability and they can decline the answer. You just can't ask those questions. Asking those questions will get you into trouble. Any other questions? Good.
So as far as asking the potential employees drug test results that would go into their pharmacy area, how much does the employer have to write to?
The question was, what are the employer's rights when it comes to drug testing employees?
For pre-employment drug testing, and this would apply whether there was a union or not a union, right? After you can condition the job on passing a drug test. Right? You can condition it on passing a drug test.
But it has to be after the offer has been made. It can't be, we're going to test all applicants. So once the offer has been made, then you can drug test. And for your current employees, as long as you have a policy that's well articulated, well publicized in terms of testing current employees, that's something else that you can do as well. And one of the management decisions you have to make is, how frequently do you want to test? Do you want to test randomly? Do you want to test periodically? Do you want to test only after an accident? Do you want to test only if there's reasonable cause? That's a management decision to make. But those are still very important criteria to factor.
You could put the question in the pre-screening questionnaire.
No, I'm sorry.
You could ask them, were you ever, I guess,
Yeah, the question was, in the application phase, can you ask about, well, can you ask about drugs? The answer is you can't ask about drugs, although you can ask about criminal convictions, which sometimes will involve drugs, obviously. So that's, the gentleman is correct. That's a fair question.
You can't ask about arrests for drugs, but you can ask about convictions for drugs. And the reason you can't ask about arrests for drugs, for years we would have thought that if you were arrested 6 times for a drug offense and never convicted, where there's smoke, there's fire. Right? And that's probably still a safe instinct. Where there's smoke, there's fire. But in this country, more people are arrested in urban areas, and more people of color live in urban areas, so that arrest question resulted in more people of color who live in urban areas not getting jobs. So logically, instinctively, we might think it's a perfectly fair question, all right, and it's tempting.
Any others? Thank you so much for spending your time with us. Thank you.